Good morning, students. Welcome to online platform of Shri Academy. In the previous video, we were discussing the chapter after 20 years. Let's continue with the chapter. So, today I will start the chapter from the beginning. The policeman on the beat moved up the avenue impressively. The impressiveness was habitual and not for show, for spectators were few. The time was barely 10 o'clock at night, but chilly gusts of wind with a taste of rain in them had a well-nigh developed the streets. The vicinity was one that kept early hours. Now and then you might see the lights of cigar store or of an all-night lunch counter, but the majority of the doors belonged to the business places that had long since been closed. When about midway of certain block, the policeman suddenly slowed his walk. In the doorway of the darkened hardware store, a man leaned with an unlighted cigar in his mouth. As the policeman walked up to him, the man spoke up quickly. So, here it is a story about two friends named Jimmy and Bob. So, Jimmy is policeman in the story. So here it is mentioned that how impressively the policeman moved on a beat. Moved on a beat means an assigned route of policemen. That means policemen are trained so well that they have a well shaped body, they are straight, they have straight personality, and they generally walks in the marching way. So the policeman was walking, and his walk is his walk is said impressive, as he is walking very gracefully, or he is walking very professionally. So it is it is said impressively, and this impressiveness was habitual. It was not for show. Why it was not for show, and why it was habitual? It was habitual because he was a policeman, and he had this walk in his routine of life. That was, he was not showing anybody, he was uh, moving the way he used to walk. The time was 10 o'clock at night. It was very chilly night. With a taste of rain. That means it was raining, and due to rain, the streets were de-peopled. Means there were no people on the streets. No people, or we can say very less people on the street, because nights are meant for sleeping, and generally people in night sleeps. So due to night, most of the people were in their houses. And the second reason was that it was raining and it was very cold outside the houses, so people were in their houses. So the streets were empty, or had very less people over the streets. So the vicinity was that here it is written that kept early hours. That means people went to bed early. In that place, people used to sleep early in the night. So only the cigar store or all night lunch counter can be seen with lights. That means the cigar store and all night lunch counters were open, and all other were shut down. It was business place, and they were all almost shut down. When about midway of certain block, while walking on the street, in the midway of a certain block, policeman saw someone, and he stopped there. And when he stopped there, when the other man saw him, he just spoke quickly. So now continue from here. "It's all right, officer," he said. "I'm just waiting for a friend." Then when the policeman walked to the man who was hiding, or who was leaned at the darkened hardware store, so that particular man said, and who was that man? That man was Bob. Bob said, "It's all right, officer." That means he has no problem, and he said to the policeman that he is waiting for his friend. It's an appointment made 20 years ago. So the Bob said to Jimmy that it was an appointment made 20 years ago. Sounds a little funny to you, doesn't it? And then Bob asked to the policeman that it sounds funny, isn't it? Well, I'll explain if you would like to make certain it's all straight. Then Bob said to the policeman that I would like to explain you that how this event took place, how 20 years ago we made this appointment. So about that long ago, there used to be a restaurant where this store stands. Big Joy Brady's restaurant. So the Bob tells the policeman that long years ago, that means about 20 years ago, there was a restaurant at the place where this store stands, and it was named Big Joy Brady's restaurant. Until 5 years ago, said the policeman, it was torn down then. So policeman said to the Bob that until 5 years ago, it was the restaurant named Big Joy Brady's restaurant, and after that it was torn down. The man in the doorway struck a match and lit his cigar. So the man who was leaned down near the hardware store, he struck his match and lit his cigar. The light showed a pale, square jawed face with keen eyes and a little white scar near his right eyebrow. So when the man struck the matchstick, the stick started burning, and that fire brought some light, and in that light policeman saw the face of the man, and it was pale. Pale means discolored or fade. So it was pale, square jaw face with keen eyes and a little white scar near his right eyebrow. And near his right eyebrow, there was a little white scar. That means it was mark of some wound that he would have got earlier. His scarf pin was a large diamond, oddly set, and he was having a scarf pin that was diamond, but it was oddly set. That means it was not set properly. 20 years ago tonight, said the man, I dined here at. So the man Bob said that 20 years ago on the same night, I dined here at Big Joy Brady's with Jimmy Wells, my best chum. So he is saying to the policeman that 20 years ago he dined with his friend named Jimmy Wells. So my best chum, that was chum is friend, so he said that he was his best friend and the finest chap in the world. And he said, also mentioned that he was the finest chap. That means he was very good person in the world. He and I were raised here in New York, just like two brothers together. So he said, who said? Bob said to the policeman that he means his friend Jimmy. He and I were raised here. So the Bob told to the policeman that Jimmy and Bob both were raised in the New York, just like two brothers together. I was 18 and Jimmy was 20. The next morning I was to start for the West to make my fortune. So at 20 years ago, Jimmy was 18 years old and Bob was 18 years old and Jimmy was 20 years old. The next morning, this description is about the night when they dined over there. That means when they took dinner together. After that night, in the next morning, I was to start for the west to make my future. He went into the that means Bob went to the west to make his fortune. That means to discover his life, to earn money and to set himself. He traveled to the west. You couldn't have dragged Jimmy out of New York. He thought it was the only place on the earth. Now, you couldn't have dragged Jimmy out of the New York. Then who asked this? The policeman asked this question to the Bob, that why didn't you took Jimmy with you out of the New York? So the narrator, that means Bob, replied he thought that it was the only place on the earth. That means here Bob is saying that Jimmy thought that the New York is the only place on the earth. Well, we agreed that night that we would meet here again exactly 20 years from that date and time, no matter what our condition might be or from what distance we might have to come. So now the Bob is telling to the Jimmy that at that particular night when they lastly dined together, they decided that they will come and meet exactly after 20 days from the date, means from the date 20 years after from the date they will come to the same place and on the same time. No matters, it doesn't matter from what is the condition of the both peoples, and it also do not matters that from what distance they will have to come, but they decided that anyhow they will come there after 20 years and meet there. We figured that in 20 years each of us ought to have our destiny worked out and our fortunes made, whatever they were going to be. And he said each of us ought to have our destiny work. That means in that 20 years they would have made their destinies, they would have made themselves what they want to do with their lives, they will have done that, whatever they were going to be, and no matters what they were, they became what they became. They were successful or they were rejected or they do not had anything or they had many things. These all things do not matter for them. It was the promise that was to be kept after 20 years. It sounds pretty interesting, said the policeman. Rather a long time between meetings, though it seems to me. Haven't you heard from your friend since you left? So the policeman said to the Bob that it sounds pretty interesting. That means whatever he is saying is quite interesting, but policeman also mentioned that it has been long time without meeting each other. Have you ever, both of you, ever had any conversation in between these 20 years? Well, yes, for a time we corresponded. So the Bob replied, yes, for a time means for a short period or for a while or for a day they corresponded. Corresponded means they communicated to each other through letters, said the other. But after a year or two we lost track of each other. So means here the Bob is telling that after a year or two we lost track of each other. That means the Bob and Jimmy had a conversation for a time of a year or a 2 year through correspondence, means through letters, but after that they were not in touch with each other even through letters. You see, the West is pretty big proposition and I kept hustling around over it pretty lively, but I know Jimmy will meet me here if he is alive, for he always was the truest. So here the narrator is saying, Bob is saying that no matters that we were not in touch, but I know that that Jimmy will surely come to him and meet me. And he also told that while he moved to the west, he had traveled around a lot of and led a hectic life, means he was very much busy in establishing himself. He mentioned this to the policeman, that he was very much busy in establishing himself, and he is very much sure that anyhow Jimmy will come. If he is alive, he will surely come to meet him. Okay, thank you students. Remaining part of the chapter we will continue in the next video. If you have any doubt, you can personally call me and clear all your doubts. Thank you.